Welcome back to the channel, guys. So this Tele, if you remember, this is the same Affinity Tele which I got during the lockdown at a ridiculous price. So it was the lockdown times and online retailers were just throwing their inventory off at ridiculous prices, and that's when I got it, just because I didn't have a Tele in my collection. So this was the cheapest guitar, which was added to my collection, and I instantly loved it. So over the last 2 years, what I've been doing is I've been doing upgrades to this Tele, and what I was chasing for is if I can make a Squier Affinity Tele into a Jimmy Page Tele. Now, that's a very big claim. What is a Jimmy Page Tele? For me, the Jimmy Page Tele is not your regular Tele. My idea for doing these upgrades on the Tele is not to make it twangy like a country like Tele sound that usually people chase. I wanted the Jimmy Page sound. So I started. Let me switch off the air conditioning here. Otherwise it's gonna really disturb us. So the Jimmy Page sound is basically the Tele sound which is raw, which reminds me of the Jimmy Page one kind of a sound. So I started researching and I started making upgrades one by one. So this guitar basically had the guts to start with. It was a top loader bridge, which is exactly what Page used. It's a C-shaped profile neck, which is exactly what the Page Tele is. It had a decent action. It came with a very good set of tuner keys. The pickups sucked initially, and the nut was really not up to the mark. The electronics again not up to the mark, but the guitar had a mojo which I liked. And strangely enough, it's a three-piece body, but the center block is one big chunk, and there are these two small fly blocks. It's an unfinished neck, which I loved. Even in my Fender Strat, I basically sanded down the neck for this feel. So I started making upgrades. The first upgrade which I did was the pickups. I upgraded them to Tex-Mex, but again, it didn't really do the job. So I had to go for something else. Anyway, so before we start as to the process I took to make this Jimmy Page Tele, let me tell you the gear I'm running on today. I'm on no pedals, I'm on no simulator. I'm trying to emulate, or rather I like to play this guitar where Jimmy Page would have played it in the initial days. That is plugged into a small tube amp, cranked, dined completely, and that's what I'm doing. I'm using a 5-watt tube amp on the clean channel, which is completely dined. That's the reason you're going to hear the distortion. Anything that you hear is basically the tube amp and a hint of delay and reverb added on my DAW, and I'm using Torpedo for my cat simulations. So that's what you hear. There's no pedal, there's no distortion. Everything is amp distortion, the way Jimmy Page used to crank up his Supro and try to get the sound. Now what we're gonna do today is I'll run you through the upgrade, but before we go into it, let's hear how this guitar sounds in the mix, and then I'll tell you specifics of how and what I did to the pickups to make it sound like the Page Tele, and of course what I did to the nut and the electronics and stuff like that. Let's listen to how it sounds in the mix, and then let's come back and dig deeper. first thing is the pickup. Sorry, there's a slight hum which is, I think, coming from. I'm not connected to my cabinet. I don't know where it's coming from, but anyways, um, so the pickups. I wanted a specific, sound out of the pickup. I went and researched what the Dragon Tele, which is currently being marketed by Fender, is made of, and what I found out is it's custom wound. So I took the Tex-Mex pickup which I had, basically, sent it to someone who winds pickups, rewound this pickup. It's an Alnico 5 magnet. Rewound these pickups using classic wires and kept it unpotted. This one, I kept it, the way it is, but I actually, tweaked it, gave it, overwound it slightly to make it muddier. And that's exactly what the Jimmy Page sound is. When it goes in the middle, you can hear the clarity coming from the bridge, but there is some muddiness coming in from the neck. So that's exactly what I shot for. And the pickup is supposed to clean up nicely, and both these pickups need to have a distinct character. So that's what I shot for. So what I'm going to do is, let me play a clip. What I'm trying to show here is how beautifully this guitar cleans up. Okay, the kind of feel which I wanted from these pickups are very simple. I wanted a raw feel, something very similar to the Jimmy Page sound from No Quarter, or the riff. Keeping the volume low, otherwise it will go to feedback because it's unpotted. Anyway, so what I wanted from the pickup is a very specific behavior which I'll demonstrate now. I wanted this to roar. I wanted this to be a little muddy. And when I'm in the in-between position and I reduce the volume, it has to clean up and give me an edge of breakup kind of a sound. Let me demonstrate that, how these pickups behave, and then we'll go to the other parts. Okay, the next upgrade which I went for after the pickups is basically the electronics. So I kind of changed the switch because it was a crappy switch, rewired the whole thing and shielded it. So that's pretty much what I did on the cavity here. The nut, the plastic nut, I'm not saying that it was bad, it was doing its job, but I wanted an upgrade. So I got myself a very, very aged bone nut. So basically, when I say aged bone nut, that bone has been drying and conditioning for over 15, 20 years. So a nut was made out of that bone, and that's what is installed. Next, it's not an upgrade technically, but it's more a feel factor. This is not a Dragon Tele because, I mean, all said and done, this is, I don't know what, this some burst and tobacco burst or whatever the color is. I didn't want to do a complete paint job before I finished the Tele. Maybe I'm gonna change this pick guard into a mirror pick guard, but check this out. I'm gonna do a close up on this. So basically, because I love this guitar so much, my niece, who is basically an artist, decided to paint the dragon on the neck of this guitar. I sanded off the Squier sign. The dragon was painted on, and the paint job was done by my wife, both my sons, both my nieces. They all signed on it because I love this guitar so much, and this became my Dragon Tele. So this is gonna stay in my collection forever. So the upgrades are very, very simple, as I pointed out. I'll do one quick round of the guitar if you want. Top loader bridge, custom wound pickups, upgraded electronics, a bone nut, and the Dragon paint job. Yes, one last thing is the fret job on this guitar was again not that great. So I had to, and it actually added to the effect of a vintage feel. I had to basically level the frets, and in the process, a lot of fret material was taken out. So it's as good as maybe plugged, and at the same time, it kind of gives a very vintagey feel to it. So overall, it sounds sweet. And if you actually, I'm reduce the volume and I'm at zero. So very ringy guitar. Rings nicely, and look at the difference between the pickups. So it gets the job done. Hope you like the video. See you next time.